this terrifying face, this expression.
They had to be held down.
Keeping his power within and constrained. And
trauma.
it really just shows you the power of the science and what it can do.
Die of fright.
This mummy is taking us into a secret world which we really didn't know existed. It does appear to be screaming.
In the darkness of Bolton Museum's cellar lies a body that's going to change history. The remains spectacularly preserved for hundreds of years. The identity completely unknown. Mummy expert Dr. Joann Fletcher has been called in to investigate this remarkable case.
I mean, it really is not normal. South American mummies aren't really supposed to look like this. Not only this extraordinary position and the facial features, but this quite amazing coating. I mean, is it an ancient preservative or a modern conservation treatment?
And I must say it looks increasingly likely to me that this is relatively recent, either applied after he was excavated or perhaps after he entered the museum. So thick and shiny in areas, and then on the soles of the feet where you'd expect, if he were buried while he was still relatively wet, he'd have picked stuff up. He hasn't. So I think some of this, at least, must be fairly modern.
Artificially preserved Peruvian mummies are extremely rare. Many experts don't even accept they exist. If this screaming mummy's bizarre red coating proves to be part of his mummification process, it will have a huge significance. The initial visual inspection is the cornerstone upon which the investigation rests. It's from this simple beginning that vital details could emerge about how this person lived and died.
With this individual, it's almost as if he's just taken this position up himself. It's a fetal position. It does convey a great pathos. You really feel for this individual.
More unusual than the mummy's posture are the bindings that hold it in position.
The knees are drawn up, the hands are fastened in position to make a neat bundle. And yet this is usually something done in twine, in string, in some sort of fibre, and yet this is clearly a leather cord that's been wrapped around the neck. So it'll be something that we really need to flag up for further investigation, I think.
It's going to be a tough case for the mummy investigation team. The screamer is totally different from anything they've experienced. It breaks all the rules for South American mummies. Peruvian mummies are widely believed to be naturally preserved, unlike the ancient Egyptians who artificially mummified their dead, embalming them with chemical preservatives and removing most of their internal organs. They're usually found in arid locations where low moisture levels quickly dry out and preserve the soft tissue that distinguishes a mummy from a simple skeleton. The mummy investigation team can't assume anything about the screamer's background or culture as they try to work out who this person was and how they died. Dr. Stephen Buckley is one of the world's top archaeological chemists. He uses cutting-edge techniques to reveal chemical clues hidden within ancient mummies.
You simply can't tell what it is by looking. Sure. You have to do the science.
Duncan Lees is a forensic archaeologist specializing in laser survey techniques. His forensic expertise means he's called in to investigate modern crime scenes all over the world.
Basic measurement is always the starting point. You can't do anything else until you've got basic measurement data.
Jill Scott is an Egyptologist and an expert in the preservation and conservation of mummies. Her research skills and wealth of archaeological knowledge make her perfect as the team's archive researcher.
The best thing I can do is give this person some sort of context.
Joanne starts by briefing the team.
This is a South American Peruvian mummy. As you can see straight away, the thing that really does grab your attention is the facial expression. It does appear to be screaming.
Quite disturbing as
Yes,
well
it
at
is.
the same time.
It is.
It's not something that's just laid out and at peace. You get a sense of sort of fear and pleasant sort of goings on.
The thing that I'm drawn to is this sort of tie around the neck, which I found rather sinister. Is it something applied around the throat that we need to investigate?
The shiny reddish resin on the body immediately arouses Stephen's curiosity. If it isn't a modern varnish, it will have huge implications for the investigation.
What I can add is the chemical analysis looking at the coating, and I think it can help tell us about whether this is ancient.
This unique mummy presents the team with a host of problems, not least because of its place of origin.
I'm a little bit worried purely for the fact that the time period that we're dealing with and with this culture, they're pre-literate. I mean, there's not going to be any written records, unlike, you know, the ancient Egyptians.
The mummy was found in the Rimac Valley on Peru's central coast. This once fertile valley, now swamped by the bustling modern city of Lima, was home to a series of cultures which existed for thousands of years before being conquered by the Inca Empire. But whether the mummy is 600 years old or 6,000 makes no difference to the available documentation. There are no written records from any ancient Peruvian culture for historians to decipher. A full-body X-ray scan of the mummy is the logical first step in the investigation. It could lead to a cause of death or reveal valuable information about the mummy's identity. The unusual coating could conceal any number of cuts or scars from an unskilled observer. For the X-ray to reveal any results about how the mummy died, the images must be examined with an expert eye. Paleopathologist Don Brothwell has conducted investigations into unusual deaths, ancient and modern, for over 40 years. Combining his expertise with Dr. Stephen Buckley's for an in-depth physical examination could reveal vital clues about the mummy's demise. Bone size and shape is a key indicator of a mummy's sex.
Big toe looks quite big. Look at that second phalanx there.
Yes.
That I would take as being our first sort of masculine indicator.
The male pelvis tends to be narrower than the female.
The greater sciatic knot is again fairly acute angle. So again, another indicator of maleness, I think, without any doubt.
Exposure to the hormone testosterone influences how the bones grow and can lead to marked differences between the sexes.
Skeletal evidence of we're dealing with a male, and I would suggest again, young male, possibly no more than 20 to 30, somewhere around that age range.
The mummy's large, strong bones haven't just revealed his sex. The lack of wear and tear around the joints shows that this mummy must have been a young man in the prime of life when he died.
I can't see any scarring or injuries which might have been received at death.
Yeah.
But we need to look at it more carefully, I think.
The X-ray scan has confirmed that the mummy is a young man, but frustratingly, nothing about how he might have died. On close examination, Stephen's suspicion that the coating is an ancient embalming mixture grows. But expert opinion is divided.
I think we have some disagreement over what that surface covering is, don't we? This is so atypical that it has got to be sort of 19th century, rather bad attempts at conserving the body. You feel that it could be much earlier, maybe?
I think it's possible. I think it's an interesting one. It's not everywhere, and there are some anomalies here.
Don, one of the world's top paleopathologists, believes that the coating is modern. To prove him and the museum wrong, Stephen will have to accomplish something extraordinary. The screaming mummy is already causing controversy among experts. It's vital the team learn more about him. A 3D laser scan can reveal valuable information about the mummy while he was alive.
This is really providing basic measurement information at a very high level of detail. What we're doing is creating millions, literally millions of highly accurate, to within 20 microns, 20 millionths of a meter, survey points across the surface of the mummy. And when we process this using advanced software, we get a very accurate representation of the structure.
A mummy isn't just a scientific curiosity. It's the remains of a young man, a human being. The virtual model gives the team the chance to examine him in precise detail with a minimum of disruption.
Basic measurement is always the starting point. You can't do anything else until you've got basic measurement data.
Background research goes hand in glove with the physical aspects of the investigation. Researcher Jill Scott finds out about the mummy's origins.
Well, he came to the museum in 1903 with a group of material from Peru given by a man called William Smithies. And here's a picture of him with his wife and children. He grew up in the northwest of England and he moved to Peru at the end of the 19th century to run a textile mill. He must have become interested in ancient Peruvian culture, and he formed several collections of material which he gave to museums in the northwest where he grew up. Here he is looking very proud of the material he's got.
And this is the one that we're looking at today. That's really fascinating. But what we can see from the one that we're looking at, even in this photo, is that it has a definite sort of shine to it coming off, and you can see it here as well.
Whether the mummy's shiny coating proves to be ancient or modern, it was certainly there 100 years ago when the photograph was taken. Determining an accurate date for the mummy is a crucial next step in the investigation. If chemist Stephen Buckley can establish when the screamer lived, it could rule out the possibility of diseases or weapons that only arrived with European invaders. Samples from the mummy's skin and coating should yield a date through analysis of a radioactive isotope, carbon-14. It's vital work, but it's a painstaking process. The mummy is priceless and delicate. One wrong move could destroy the very evidence they're looking for. Stephen's other key tool is chemical fingerprinting. From just a tiny sample of the mummy's coating, about the size of a pinhead, Stephen can identify every constituent compound. This can mean hundreds of different substances. The ingredients used in this coating could reveal extraordinary information about the people who created it and the world they inhabited. After processing the laser scanning results, Duncan consults paleopathologist Don Brothwell to see if the data from the scan can provide information about the mummy while he was alive.
What we've done is taken the scan data and taken each individual component of the anatomy and put them together in an animation here so that you can see him standing up.
I love that. At the joints, the knee and the thigh, for instance, have you taken into account the anatomy of these areas?
The laser scan has precisely measured every part of the mummy that still exists, but in life, those parts would be connected by ligaments, cartilage, and soft tissue, adding height. Unless these factors are taken into account, any estimates of the mummy's dimensions will be inaccurate.
Looking at the data, we've got an individual here who's just over 1 metre 40, 1 metre 42 or so tall. And I think looking at the data that we've used, we're confident that that's about right. We can't envisage that he's any shorter than that. He might be slightly taller than that, and that is, information or something that I'd take your advice on.
Clearly there's shrinkage due to the drying of the body, but I wouldn't expect some of the South American populations to be particularly tall, so I'd accept that, but with maybe a minor increase.
Right, okay.
At around 1 metre 42, well under 5 feet tall, the mummy would seem tiny to modern eyes. But for an ancient South American, it would be unusual to grow any taller. The laser scan could also validate a theory Don has been considering for some time.
The other thing that really intrigues me is the flattened foot there. My suspicion has been for a long time that a lot of these crouch burials actually were placed in the graves in a sort of sitting position.
Right.
That does look as if it's the ideal position of these crouched burials for burial.
Which contrasts nicely with the way we had to record him in the museum. Well, what I can do is move him around and then look at this orientation. I mean, there, just about there, you've got an alignment, haven't you, with the feet and the buttocks.
Correct, in terms of how he was placed in the grave.
Right.
The laser scan has not only revealed his height, it's also provided support for Don's theory that crouched mummies like the Screamer were originally buried upright. They might be small details, but it's the first stage in building a picture of who this man was and the world that he lived in. Stephen Buckley believes that the mummy's unique coating could be a vital clue to his identity, and an accurate date for it could be essential in solving two key mysteries. Carbon-14 dating can not only tell us when the Screamer lived, it could determine whether his extraordinary coating was applied when he died or by a modern-day curator. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope that can be found in every living thing. When something dies, the carbon-14 decays at a fixed rate to be replaced by nitrogen-14. The proportions of these two substances can give a date for anything that lived in the last 50,000 years. The results from the carbon-14 dating laboratory in Oxford have arrived.
We've got the dates here from Oxford to C14, and it's 849 BP, plus or minus 22. And what that actually gives us in calendar years is 95% probability that it's between 1157 and 1254 AD, so around 1200 AD.
This figure of 1200 AD dates both the mummy and the coating.
That's actually a massive piece of information. It's a massive step forward in this investigation, isn't it? Because this is no byproduct of conservation treatment in modern times.
This is a major breakthrough. Just like the mummy, the coating, it appears, is ancient, around 800 years old. Whatever the museum experts might say, the science suggests that the Screamer was artificially mummified as long ago as 1200 AD. This turns conventional thinking on its head. The date can also help with the forensic process of elimination.
It's before any contact with the Europeans. So as a cause of death, we can factor out all the diseases of the old world.
Right.
That date...
It means that much.
It means that much.
It's a huge step forward, but there's still plenty of hard work ahead to crack the case. Joanne wants to focus on the mummy's cause of death, and since the X-rays failed to tell the team much beyond the Screamer's age and sex, she calls for a CT scan. This sophisticated imaging device uses a series of X-ray images taken from all around the body to build up a 3D picture of its interior. The CT scan is more sophisticated than the X-ray and can detect minute changes to the mummy's soft tissues, which could be crucial in determining how he died.
There are various factors. Maybe there are factors of trauma, which we'll have to scan all the skeleton and body to see whether we can see any evidence of violence on the person. Another thing which interested me on the X-rays was that it looks as if there might be some sort of scalp infection, but again, we really need to look at it carefully, and after this initial CT scanning.
Oh, that's interesting, because I've seen scalp infection before in Peru when there's sort of been a parasitic infection of the scalp, and it was really, really nasty.
In an age before antibiotics, even apparently minor illnesses could be deadly.
Skull looks as if it's empty of brain. We need to carefully study every image that is presented by the scanner.
It's a small start, but the team finally has something to go on. The discovery of a possible scalp infection means the skull could be a key area to yield information about the mummy's health. The CT scan has produced a total of 796 images of the mummy's body. Each one must be examined in detail before any definitive judgments can be made. The team know that this terrifying-looking mummy is actually the body of a young man from the coast of Peru. He lived around 1200 AD and seems to have suffered from a scalp infection. The mummy's red coating appears to be as old as the mummy itself. If they can show it's part of the mummification process, the team will have made a major discovery. The focus of the investigation is shifting. The team now need to understand the mindset and culture of the people who created this unique mummy if they're going to solve this mysterious case. Joanne consults a specialist in ancient Peruvian culture, anthropologist Dr. Nick Saunders, to find out more about Peruvian mummies.
They play a central role because the mummies are basically ancestors. And it's the ancestors, the ones who are dead but are given respect and buried. It's basically, they're the ones who are talking to the spirit world. They're the ones who will guarantee the fertility of women, the fertility of the fields, the fertility of llamas, corn cobs, cotton plants. All of these things rely on the spirit world supporting the physical world. They were talked to, they were cleaned, they were fed. And this idea was basically to get them on their side so that the mummies would talk to the spirit world and the rains would come and the ocean would come and El Nino wouldn't come and all of this kind of thing.
The mummy isn't merely a well-preserved corpse. It's a means of communicating with, even controlling, the spirit world that the ancient Peruvians thought was vital to their survival. It's a fascinating insight into a vanished world. But for all its supernatural importance, this mummy was once a living, breathing person, and the team are no closer to finding out how he died.
Well, I think in many respects it's there's a range of possibilities. One is being ritually sacrificed. Another might be damaged and injured and then died from warfare. But equally interesting is that it's the possibility that they may well have died through sorcery. In terms of the spiritual beliefs of these people, if you believe implicitly in ideas of shamanism and sorcery, I mean, it's more than possible that you could die literally of fright.
So scared to death?
Yeah, absolutely.
Death by black magic at the hands of a shaman is an idea alien to modern forensics, but for ancient Peruvians it would have been a terrifyingly real possibility. The mummy's screaming face strongly suggests terror, but does the idea stand up to expert analysis? Joanne doesn't believe it. She asked Dom to go over the evidence generated by the investigation so far to see if they can come up with a credible cause of death.
Of course, the thing that is best known about these kind of individuals is the facial expression. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm sure it's just that the jaw dropped open.
Yeah, through gravity.
Yeah, I think so. You see this again and again. Even in skeletons, many cemeteries where you've no soft tissue at all, you see the jaw dropped like this.
It's
an
just a
interesting
natural one, though, isn't it? It's a very powerful expression, though, nevertheless, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like a scream. But I think it's very natural that the jaw drops open, I'm afraid.
The terrifying expression on the mummy's face is a forensic dead end. There's just no evidence to back up the idea that he was scared to death.
I have to say, I'm quite concerned about this cord around the neck because, of course, we know that they did apply them to keep the hands up to the face and retain this neat shape. But this, to me, appears to be a sort of triple thickness leather kind of ligature almost. So I'd be interested for your thoughts on that.
As it extends from the neck around the hands, it's obviously, I mean, they were not garroting the individual, were they?
Not with this, not with this.
They were obviously containing the hands close to the head. That's really what it amounts to. But you're right, I mean, there's a big difference between this simple and this rather complicated looking thing here containing rope around the neck and the hands.
But I don't remember seeing any sign of neck injury, so on the X-rays.
No.
So I think we can discount that as a cause of death.
Spine looks fine on the X-rays.
However sinister the screamer's leather bindings appear, it seems they too were not used to kill him. The screamer's cause of death is proving elusive. The team are short on hard facts. They know the mummy's unique coating was applied around 800 years ago, but they don't know what it's made of or what effect it's had on the body. Identifying the ingredients is crucial. During GCMS analysis, tiny samples are heated until they turn into gas. The temperature at which substances in the samples vaporize is a telltale clue to their identity. From the first results of the chemical analysis, Stephen Buckley can start to answer these crucial questions.
What we have here is carvacrol. You actually find it in oregano. It comes from a number of plant sources. And what we also have here is balsam. And this is produced by a number of plants, and it has antibacterial properties, and it's been used by many cultures throughout the world, and we seem to be seeing one here in a Peruvian context.
The discovery of a combination of powerful natural antibacterials backs up Stephen's idea that this mixture is a preservative, but he's also identified an anomaly.
Yeah, what's perhaps slightly perplexing here is that we have a tropical conifer resin, and yet the mummy is not from a tropical region. It's from a coastal valley. You know, why do you have a tropical conifer resin used in the mummification of someone connected with the coast and the coastal valleys? That's the question for me.
To track down the tree it comes from, Stephen has to eliminate thousands of other species. It's vital work, but the conifer resin forms just 12% of the coating. Stephen has already identified a source for the bulk of the mixture.
What we also have in here is a marine oil.
Ah, right. That's rather unexpected.
The fatty acids in here are pointing to a shellfish, which is interesting for me because it wouldn't be the obvious thing to use if preservation was the only concern.
Besides being extremely hard to obtain, the marine oil would have had a highly unpleasant odour.
The most plausible reason would be a highly symbolic one, because if you were just thinking of a component to mix these antibacterials with, then a plant oil would be a much better choice.
Anointing the mummy with oils from the sea would be done for a definite purpose. Since mummies were used as intermediaries for harnessing elemental forces, tying them strongly to the sea would make them more useful and more powerful. The team have made significant progress towards identifying the origins of the mummy's unique coating, but they still have to prove its purpose. The mummy could have survived intact for the last 800 years because of the dry conditions it was kept in, but Stephen thinks the coating has been crucial to his preservation. The chemical compounds contained in the coating are antibacterials and preservatives that he believes should have staved off the decomposition process. To prove this combination would have worked as an effective preservative on real flesh, he's recreating the mixture and testing it on a pair of pig's legs.
How confident are you that this is actually going to work?
Well, what I am confident of is that this is replicates. It's a very good proxy for what we saw on the mummy.
Okay.
And so I'm secure in that. The question is how effective it will be.
The ingredients in the mixture may not come from the same obscure sources as those in the mummy's coating, but Stephen's ensured they are chemically close enough to perform the same function.
The three main components in this mixture are the carvacrol. It's an antibacterial, powerful antibacterial. And then you have the marine oil, and we're actually using cod liver oil. But it has a similar chemistry in terms of the unsaturation, which again, from a chemical point of view and a preservative point of view, if you like, it is a useful proxy. And then you have conifer resin, which again has antibacterial properties, and they will effectively act as a sealant.
Almost like a plastic surface almost over.
Yeah,
a sealant. A sealant.
A sealant,
A
absolutely.
varnish, I suppose.
Absolutely, varnish, yeah.
Okay.
Good way of putting it, absolutely.
The challenge facing Stephen isn't simply one of mixing the ingredients together. For the chemicals to bond without losing their preservative properties, they must be added in precise proportions. The heating process must also be carefully controlled. Too much heat and the mixture will cook and become inert. Too little and the blend won't take. Now the mixture has been applied to real flesh, pig's trotters, they'll have to wait. They'll only know whether the experiment has been a success after enough time has passed for the decomposition process to set in. While the scientists are waiting for their results, researcher Jill Scott has been finding out more about how the mummy got to Britain to see if she can reveal any details that will help the investigation. William Smithies grew up in the northwest of England and donated many of his treasures to local museums. His biggest donation was apparently 4 mummies given to Bolton Museum, but the museum's records seem to indicate there was at least one more, not seen in the photograph. Jill has discovered from the records that much of Smithies' original donation, including 2 mummies, was destroyed by bombing in the Second World War. But deep in their stores, Bolton Museum have found a survivor, another mummy found in the same location as the screamer.
Well, this is amazing. I mean, look at the preservation of the material here.
He or she must be extremely crunched up inside, because this obviously is a false head. It's got these wonderful silver eyes and teeth.
Yeah.
But the person inside is really scrunched up in the bundle, and the fact that they've been swathed with what must be layers and layers of these wonderful coloured woven textiles means they must be someone of fairly high status.
Can we presume that the mummy that we're actually studying in this case would have been wrapped in a similar fashion to this?
It's possible. He's certainly the right size to be bundled up into something like this.
Do we know where the wrappings are on the mummy upstairs?
No, he came to us, as you saw in the photograph, unwrapped. So they could be, they may not have been worth keeping on him. They may have been taken off and sold separately.
So hopefully, somewhere, the wrappings of the mummy upstairs that we're looking at for this case will still exist. So it'll be great to see if we can try and find those.
In a world without writing, textiles were a medium for the visual language of ancient Peru. If they can be found, textiles could give valuable information about the society that created them and the screamer. The experiment to prove that the combination of chemicals in the mummy's coating can preserve flesh still has weeks left to run. Until decomposition has had time to take effect, there's no way of telling whether the mixture is effective. If the mixture fails, the embalmed legs will rot just as fast as the untreated ones kept as a control for the experiment. At Warrington Museum, anthropologist Nick Saunders has tracked down a batch of textiles also found by William Smithies in the Rimac Valley, the mummy's home. The Rimac culture that created him had no written words to record their history, but the designs on the fabric can tell us something about the society the mummy lived in.
We can really embark on a voyage of discovery, because in these textiles it's kind of a secret code of the world of pre-Columbian Peru. We have to bear in mind that they were making textiles thousands of years before they made pottery. It's the single longest line of continuous textile production in the whole world, 10,000 years.
What were these particular textiles actually used for? What was their purpose?
This particular one over here, or these pieces over here, they could have been worn around the head, binding the hair during life, and then around the mummy after death.
For important individuals, valuable textiles could be taken from temples to wrap around them. The designs on the fabric could be spiritually significant.
So you can see, Joe, there's a nice sort of selection of fish here. In fact, it might be sort of partly anthropomorphic as well, but it's basically lines and lines of fish arrayed quite splendidly.
These textiles clearly show that fish and the sea were important to the lives of the people who created the mummy, a people aware of the natural world and respectful of its power. A picture is emerging of the world the mummy inhabited, but the team are no closer to knowing how he died. During the CT scan, paleopathologist Don Brothwell identified what was possibly a serious scalp infection. Without modern medicine, could this have played a part in the screamer's death? After hours of intense analysis of the scans, he's made his judgment.
There are some interesting sort of questions related to the sections, these CT sections. For instance, in this section here, which is a section through the skull, just above the eyes, and I don't know if you can see it, Duncan, but On the outer surface of the bones of the skull there, above the eyes, there's irregularity.
I zoom in on that.
Oh yes, you can see it even better. Irregularities there.
Yeah, you've got a couple of areas, haven't you, where there's a deformation almost.
And I think that is possibly indicating an infection which we know occurred in various American Indian populations, and it's a disease which is related to venereal syphilis, which we know occur in early prehistoric Amerindian populations. And I think we actually have evidence of that.
Treponematosis, the relative of syphilis likely to be responsible for the screamer's skull damage, is caused by tiny spiral-shaped bacteria that reproduce rapidly in the lymphatic system after infection. The bacteria can eventually affect the heart, brain, eyes and bones. In the mummy's case, his skull has borne the brunt. Treponematosis can kill, but the mummy's symptoms just aren't severe enough to suggest that the mummy died from this infection. It has to be ruled out of the investigation. For 30 days, the two sets of pig's legs, one embalmed, the other left untouched, have been left outside to decompose. Now, as they come to open the boxes, Stephen and Duncan are at last able to prove whether the shiny red coating on the screamer's body is an effective preservative. If Stephen's right, the pig's legs protected by the duplicated mixture should be unaffected by decomposition.
So with a slight sense of trepidation, shall we see what we've got then?
Yeah.
We'll take the embalmed one first.
I think
So I'll just move this one away.
We carefully remove that.
There isn't actually that much odour from that, is there?
No, it's not too bad.
And quite a strong, quite a pale colour to it.
Yeah,
So
a little on the pale side.
You see what this one's like by contrast then?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm opening it this way. Oh, you can... Oh, the smell is
Bit of a
completely different.
Yes, indeed.
There's immediately a stench. And what's happened?
The bacteria doing their worst to decay the flesh and produce this sort of darkening colour. And here, as you can see, really quite pale. Not too different to the original colour, perhaps a little paler, but
Right.
looking in fairly good condition. I think it's...
Flies are starting to arrive already.
yeah. And I think
We leave the insects to it.
Without the protection of the coating, the dark, rotting meat instantly attracts flies keen to lay eggs, which in turn hastens decomposition. The embalmed legs are almost untouched. The hard, preserved flesh is an uninviting prospect for the flies. It's proof of the mixture's preservative properties. This is a remarkable discovery, an artificially preserved South American mummy. But Stephen still wants to track down the origin of the mysterious tropical conifer resin vital to his preservation. Through a process of elimination, he's just made an even more astonishing discovery.
what we can say from the chemistry is that it is not one of those two Araucaria species that come from South America.
Araucarias are massive ancient conifers that go back over 100 million years. The nearest suitable tropical conifers would have been just a few hundred miles away across the Andes, but chemically they just don't match. There is no other source for thousands of miles. This revelation is so extraordinary, it's essential Stephen works out exactly where this conifer resin came from. He embarks on a process of elimination that will involve thousands of chemical comparisons. The rest of the team concentrate on the screamer's identity. The mummy's bindings may have been discounted as a cause of death, but could they provide another clue to his identity?
It's strange that this skeleton shows no sign of trauma or
No, we
pressure.
can't see anything around the throat.
So, I mean, it may well be that the piece of leather around the neck is not so much something that was actually used to kill him, but it exists on a symbolic level to identify that person as what we would call a criminal or somebody who's done something against the social mores of the society. So forever and a day, in the eternity of the ancient Peruvians on the coast, he would have been marked out as maybe a thief or an adulterer or a shaman who did the improper spells and caused illness or disease on somebody else.
The idea that the mummy was a victim of black magic, scared to death, has been discounted. His screaming expression was simply the result of natural breakdown of the body over centuries. It's only speculation, but our mummy could have been someone who has broken the law or a taboo and has been symbolically punished.
Yeah, I think we could be looking at a sort of a dangerous spirit that lives inside of a person who transgressed the rules of society.
Spells and magic were a part of everyday life for the natives of South America, a tradition that continues to this day. With only tiny fragments of evidence to go on, the investigation into his identity has been tough, but it has given some amazing insights into the world that created the mummy. A world where mummies are used to harness the elemental forces of nature and the sea. Chemical analysis and experimentation has proved, in defiance of conventional wisdom, that he is artificially preserved, embalmed with a tree resin from another continent. Stephen has been working through the thousands of sheets of data, and he's made a breakthrough. He's finally pinned down the mystery location of the tropical conifer resin, and it's extraordinary.
Where the chemistry fits very nicely is with an Araucarian resin from the Southwest Pacific, used in the embalming of this Peruvian mummy.
And this information is from the sample of resin that we've had carbon dated, and we know it's ancient, don't we?
Yeah, that's right, 1200 AD.
So this result is based on a sample of resin from 1200 AD from ancient Peru.
Yeah.
This is a massive finding, isn't it?
The implications are huge. The idea that there was human contact across the Pacific flies in the face of current thinking in botany, anthropology, and history. According to the historical record, Ferdinand Magellan was the first to cross the Pacific in 1521, 300 years after the screamer was embalmed with this resin. The resin comes from an Araucarian tree, and Stephen's analysis has traced the sample to a species only found on the other side of the world's largest ocean, the Pacific, over 7,000 miles from Peru. It's a very rare species, related to the well-known monkey puzzle tree. This finding is so extraordinary, the team need to consider exactly how the resin could have got to Peru. Before they start rewriting the history books, they have to rule out the possibility that it arrived by chance. Could an Araucarian log have drifted all the way across the ocean to Peru and the mummy's embalmers? Stephen checks the possibility with the National Oceanography Centre.
It's Stephen Buckley here.
Though the prevailing anti-clockwise current would have taken it across the Pacific, the log would have been unlikely ever to reach land. If it did, the journey would have taken over a year, and by then the log would have deteriorated so badly that there would be no sap left. A floating log is just not a plausible explanation for the presence of the tree resin in the screamer's coating. If natural causes cannot explain the presence of the conifer resin on the mummy, the only other possibility is something almost unthinkable to the academic world. In 1947, Thor Heyerdahl made an epic journey across the Pacific on a balsa wood raft, attempting to prove human contact between ancient South America and Pacific islanders. The journey was a success, but few scientists accepted it as proof. The idea of ancient contact between South America and the Pacific Islands has been largely discounted by serious anthropologists ever since. But it looks as if contact between the continents is the only explanation for Stephen's extraordinary findings. Dr. Stephen Hooper is an anthropologist who has already started to question the accepted wisdom.
The only reasonable explanation, if one can account for this arriving in South America, is that it was taken by stages, perhaps over a long period of time. And the reason we know that something must have happened is because the sweet potato, curiously enough, which is a South American cultigen, was taken into the Pacific and spread quite widely after about 1000 AD.
The spread of the sweet potato, albeit in the opposite direction, combined with the discovery of the tree resin on the mummy, appear to be good evidence of contact between Pacific Islanders and South Americans. The journey that brought the tree resin to Peru and the mummy would have been a mammoth undertaking.
We know these were voyages of exploration. These people were looking to colonize new lands. They had big canoes. Sure. They had canoes over 100 feet long, 30 meters. They were capable of making these 3,000-mile voyages.
In these extraordinary vessels, some longer than the first European ships to sail the Pacific, Polynesians could carry much more than basic necessities.
You would not only take food and water, but you would take, in a sense, a cultural package, because you might well be transporting your entire cultural group there. And so things important to you of symbolic importance, which could be a particular tree species or materials. And so in a general sense, something arriving from the West, ultimately Polynesia, being incorporated and used for important ritual purposes in relation to the burials and preservation of high-status corpses, it's not implausible.
The date and the presence of the Pacific Araucarian resin on the mummy are chemically proven. Whatever the history books might say, the only sensible explanation is that this precious cargo was transported across the Pacific. The implications for the screamer personally are clear. To be coated in an embalming resin from over 7,000 miles away, this man must have been hugely important. These discoveries make the screamer one of the most remarkable cases the team has worked on, with a series of extraordinary revelations.
I mean, it really is not normal.
Why do you have a tropical conifer resin used in the mummification of someone connected with the coast and the coastal valleys?
I think we could be looking at a sort of a dangerous spirit.
We have an Araucarian resin from the Southwest Pacific used in the embalming of this Peruvian mummy.
The investigation may not have revealed how the mummy died, but the story it's uncovered is much bigger than the fate of one man.
It's sort of rewriting the history of a continent.
No, you see, it's not even rewriting it, it's writing it full stop, because we just didn't have that information to begin with.
It really just shows you the power of the science and what it can do.
The team have discovered that the screamer is artificially preserved, that his coating dates to 1200 AD, that it contains antibacterial preservatives, and that the key ingredient came from the other side of the Pacific Ocean hundreds of years before the history books say it was possible.
It kind of makes me wonder if Smithies himself, when he brought this mummy over, if he had any sort of inkling how important this individual was.
The revelations about his mummification add a new chapter to the history of the Southern Hemisphere.
He's really, at the centre of an extraordinary universe. They understood ecology, they understood chemistry, they understood their environment.
The embalming materials used, it's really quite sophisticated. Their world was quite a large one.
Effectively, this mummy is taking us into a secret world which we really didn't know existed.
The full story of the epic sea voyages that must have led to the creation of this mummy may take years to emerge. Perhaps when it does, we'll find out more about the mysterious man beneath the extraordinary coating. One thing's for certain, this mummy will be making waves for some time to come.